Hello and welcome to this Beyond Character workshop. We're continuing our work on the character of Richard II within the play known as Thomas of Woodstock. We've already done one session so far looking at the character. We're about halfway through his individual text. And what we're doing with this is we're going through just what Richard says, plus some cue points, to just get a sense of the flow of the dialogue. We're doing everything very surface. We're directing primarily via popular culture references rather than anything, proper and more detailed. And today there's a nice small room to just play around with this text. So reading the part of Richard II is Tamara. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tamara. I'm an actor usually based in London, currently in my mum's storage room, which I've since dressed up a little bit, in Germany.
And joining Tamara and assisting with cues and other thoughts and suggestions is Aliki. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Aliki. I'm a theatre maker and translator based in Lancaster, and I still haven't read the play.
Also assisting is Sascha. Sascha, introduce yourself.
Hello everybody, I'm Sascha Cooper and I'm a professional actress and all-round performer based in Crighton in the UK.
And finally we also have Alexandra. Alexandra, introduce yourself.
Hi, my voice in the darkness is Alexandra. I am in hiding from a tiny little monster, and I figure if you don't see me, it won't. No, my computer is just being uncooperative.
Excellent. And today I am your host. I'm Robert Crighton, and I am mostly just handing out unhelpful suggestions. That's basically what my purpose in life is. So we're about halfway through the play, or at least 2/3 of the way through the play. And Richard has so far managed to grab some power. He's been denied power by his uncles. His uncles have been essentially controlling the state up until now. In the last very dramatic scene that we had, Richard, who's been having more and more arguments with his uncles, finally in a dramatic coup de théâtre, steals power from them by revealing that he is in fact of age and he can take over Parliament, and thus he does so, and all his uncles go off in a huff. Richard and his minions, his young supporters, as opposed to his older uncles, have then decided that they're going to go on a spending spree and have some fun. And we're just going to read through, in a rough sense, the scene that follows this action. So after some small gap with Richard having exited earlier and some other stuff going on, here we have the re-entrance of Richard. He gets a senate, he gets a trumpet call as he enters. His mates, Bagot, Bushy, Green, and Scroop, very richly attired in new fashions. They've really gone out, and they haven't just bought some new clothes. They've actually designed it themselves. They've really gone to town. They've got Tresillian, who is their new Lord Chief Justice, who's doing all the plotting. He's whispering to the king as this scene enters. And most important of all, King Richard has a guard of archers. He has his own bodyguard of light artillery. So that's what he's got going for him. And I'll ask Aliki if you could read the cue lines in for this particular section. So Richard, however, I believe opens the scene.
Come, my Tresillian. Thus, like an emperor shall King Richard reign, and you, so many kings attendant on him. Our guard of archers, keep the doors, I charge thee. Let no man enter to disturb our pleasures. Thou toldst me, kind Tresillian, thou'dst devised blank charters to fill up our treasury, opening the chests of hoarding cormorants that laugh to see their kingly sovereign lack. Let's know the means, we may applaud thy wit.
To the Queen.
Now, Anne Beam, how cheers my dearest queen? Is't holiday my love? Believe me, lords, 'tis strange to take her from her sempstery. She and her maids are all for housewifery. Shalt work no more, sweet Nan. Now Richard's king, and peer and people all shall stoop to him. We'll have no more projecting uncles, trust me. Prithee, look smooth, and bid these nobles welcome.
Me be welcome.
These are our counsellors, I tell ye, lady, and these shall better grace King Richard's court than all the doting heads that late controlled us. Thou seest already we begin to alter the vulgar fashions of our homespun kingdom. I tell thee, Nan, the states of Christendom shall wonder at our English royalty. We held a council to devise these suits. Sir Henry Green devised this fashion shoe, Bushy this pick, Bagot and Scroop set forth this kind coherence twixt the toe and knee to have them chained together lovingly, and as sovereign did confirm them all. Suit they not quaintly, Nan? Sweet queen, resolve me.
The sentence were...
An act of folly, Nan. King's words are laws. If we infringe our word, we break our law. No more of them, sweet queen.
Understand his state?
They tell thee true, sweet love. Come ride with me, and see today my hall at Westminster, which we have builded now to feast our friends.
In the wearing?
We'll ride through London only to be gazed at. Fair Annaby, you shall along with us. At Westminster you shall see my sumptuous hall, my royal table richly furnished, where every day I feast 10,000 men. To furnish out which feast I daily spend 30 fat oxen and 300 sheep, with fish and fowl in numbers numberless. Not all our chronicles shall point a king to match our bounty, state, and royalty, or let successors yet to come strive to exceed me. And if they forbid it, let records say only King Richard did it.
A year together.
As many days as I writ England's king, we will maintain that bounteous festival. Tressilian, look to your blank charters speedily. Send them abroad with trusty officers. And Bagot, see a messenger be sent to call our Uncle Woodstock home to the court. Not that we love his meddling company, but that the raged commons love his plainness, and should grow mutinous about these blanks. We'll have him near us. Within his arrow's length, we'll stand secure. We can restrain his strength. See it done. Come, man, to our great hall, where Richard keeps his gorgeous festival.
And trumpet sounds, and that's the end of that scene. On a very surface level, it's it's all about demonstration of excess. But I think it's really interesting. Most of the dialogue that is reacting to here is either a flatterer's point of view or the Queen's point of view. And he's trying to say to the Queen, look at all this wonderful stuff. And she's clearly the negative in this, going, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Seems to be her primary thrust. And Richard seems to shut that down quite well, sort of midway through the scene. So there is a bit of a journey, even within just Richard's dialogue there that is interesting.
He tries to, but he's also or at least maybe that's just me, because I'm still reading the lines and I don't know them that well yet, and I haven't actually got people there. But he's it's very much turning from one person to the next and doing this and doing that, sometimes in the same line. So it's not, you do this, cool, you do that, cool, it's you do this, you do that, and also, can you see how awesome this is? But don't critique anything. And also, what's with the blank charters? Wait, what? It's just jumping around a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that you're working at, as it were. There's two really interesting things in your final speech at the scene as well that I really liked. It's obviously, the question is, how long are you going to be spending all this money? And as many days as I am king. Now there's a dangerous statement to be making. In terms of I'm going to be spending this money forever, and also only so long as I'm alive.
Dramatic irony.
But also that within this arrow's length we stand secure. I mean, you have literally got archers with you. You know, it's this. There is a suggestion of force. You know, you will enforce your uncle if he's here. Look, we're surrounded by archers. You know, it's like basically saying, holding a gun. You plan to hold a gun to your uncle's head if he doesn't agree with what you're doing. If he's not, you know, he's there to be a scapegoat. Other thoughts? Just anything about what Richard is saying, language he's using, thoughts from the room?
One thing I found interesting was that the speech just before the one you're talking about ends in a rhyming couplet. If they forbid it, only King Richard did it. As if he wants to end there, and then something, and obviously I don't know what Anne says, but something makes him add the second speech. He's not even able to decide when his own scene ends.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
One linguistic thing that I'm finding interesting is that, and I think it's a characterization element here. He seems to be, he's not speaking down to Anne, but he is speaking from a position of superiority. He seems to be, I don't know what the, condescending to her.
Yes.
More or less subtly, and doing it in a way that I don't think he realizes he's doing it. I think he thinks he's being benevolent, but that's certainly how it reads. And I was thinking it connects really well as a characterization evolution element to what we've seen him do in the other scenes where he's been, where he's had a lot of dialogue with first his uncles and speaking from, if we go very, very far back, he's speaking mostly to his uncles, and he's speaking almost from a position of inferiority. Oh, please, can we stop doing it? Can we not fight now? Then he's got the reversal where he's fighting for his position of authority, and now that he's succeeded, he's had himself recrowned, he's taken over, you know, he's taken power into his own hands. He is speaking from a position of superiority. It also changes who he speaks to. Oh, sorry, and I missed equality with his friends when we were talking about how with his followers, everyone seems to be very familiar and almost unnaturally equal to him in the way that they speak. You know, nobody's giving him reverence. So it seems to me as though the play is setting up by showing us not just an evolution in time, but also just showing us this person talking to different people. He's got different status with respect to, or he feels he has different status with respect to the people that he's surrounded by. But because the structure of the play is actually setting it up so that we see him talk to them more in order of elevation of status, we're receiving this notion that he's growing immensely. If that's making sense, or that in his own eyes he might be.
Sascha, any thoughts about Richard so far?
Not really, to be honest, apart from how he views Anne. And I want to, before I go into that, ask a quick clarification questions. The use of the word Nan. There may be a few viewers out there who may be a bit confused by the use of that word, because when you hear Nan, in modern context, it is it's referring to a grandmother. Would Nan be almost like a nickname for Anne, or am I being too simplistic?
No, I think it's equivalent of Anne. So it's Nan. It seems to be affectionate. I'm just looking to see if there's any particular footnote here that brings it up. Yeah,
it's definitely that it gets used in several plays of the era, and it comes from the same type of behavior or linguistic thing as Ned for Edward.
Oh yes, Ned. Okay, yeah. So following, I just wanted to clarify that because it can be a bit confusing.
Well, it's a good, before you continue, it's a good note for Tamara is that, you've got to use that in an overly affectionate sort of way, or even, again, patronizing kind of way, to get that across so that we don't have that confusion. So I continue, Sascha.
Oh, that's okay, because that's kind of following on what I was going to say, how he views Anne, especially in the first time that he mentions her. What strikes me is how I if we look on Richard as him viewing women a certain way, and I know it's the typical of the era as well, but when he says, "Believe me, lords, 'tis strange to take her from her sempstrey. She and her maids are all for housewifery. Shalt work no more, sweet man." And it's weird. It's almost as if one instance in those first two lines, he's saying, "Oh well, yes, I mean, all women are used to being housewives, or stuck behind closed doors." But oh no need to. But and then immediately he switches again, to oh, but you don't have to work anymore, my love. It's like it's still asserting that authoritative approach, especially now he's king. It's almost like, I think somebody was saying before, I think it was you actually, Tamara, who was saying, "Oh, yes, well, look at this. Don't criticize that. Don't." But it's almost like it's the same with Anne. "Oh, no need to work anymore, my dear. No. Come on, it's all to me now, yeah." And it's like, okay, one minute you're really condescending towards women, and then all of a sudden, "Oh, but you don't need to work anymore, my love." But I mean, that's how it comes across anyway.
I mean, it's still condescending, isn't it? Because it's the
Mm.
equivalent of, "I make enough money, you don't have to work."
Yeah,
I've gone up.
exactly.
Yeah, we've gone up in the world, love. You can stop doing the piecework and enjoy the route, the my labours, what they bring to the household, kind of thing.
It's also interesting that I just realized now that you've said that, Sascha. It's Nan throughout the whole scene, except for the very beginning when she
Yeah.
comes in. And then in the last two lines, it's like, "Come Anne,"
Mm.
which is almost like, yeah.
Well, it might just be public difference between public voice and private voice. In the as their entrances and exits, it might be Anne, everyone, and then you get more in close, and you're talking to Nan. But then there still could be something nasty about that in the way of sort of, in public everything's lovely, Nan. Do not, if it could be quite controlling, go into quiet, Brian, blessed voice. There. And I think there is that, Anne in this scene is the one who is putting in a block on Richard, doing what he wants. The others are all about, do we like here, and how do we make it happen? Whereas Anne is the one who's dissenting, and that creates a double element, I think, with Anne as well.
And she has always tried to pacify the uncles.
Mm.
And now I'm probably like, with the housewifery and the, "You don't need to do that anymore. It's fine."
Have fun. You should drink more. Here, take some E. That'll be that. You should join in the party with the rest of us. And she doesn't do that.
You have to drive home tomorrow. Are you sure that's a good idea?
You have to rule the kingdom, love. Do you sure you want to be drinking and driving a country? Okay, so I just want to read through that one once again. This time I think it's Richard. Whenever you think you're talking to the wider world or to your mates.
I was going to say, yeah, I think that's a big thing for this scene to kind of decide when it's the public and the archers and everybody and all that, and when it's private.
Yeah, I think the difference is not so much private and explicitly public. I think it's that opening speech is to everyone, and then maybe the next line, now Anna Beam, and then draw everything in, because every time the Queen speaks, she is putting a resistance to what you want to do. And you're trying to persuade her, but you're also trying to be patronizing at the same time, which isn't a very helpful direction. And I just think it just gets more aggressive towards the end. An act of folly, Nan. Shut up, is what he's saying there. King's words are laws. I think there's something much harder as you go on.
Yeah.
It gets harder, and then again, back to that public voice for those last two speeches, except for moments when you might want to just point it a bit more. I don't know if other people think that's sort of the right idea. I don't know if there's a wrong idea at this stage.
I think so.
You know, when he's
Let's
saying,
try and find out.
yeah, when you say lines like, you know, fair Anna Beam, you shall along with us, you know, it's not like she has a choice, presumably. So even though it's a public speech, you know, fair Anna Beam, you shall, you know, I think there's an implicit threat in all of this. And you like the idea that getting Woodstock into the court and you're going to have your archers available to keep him under control.
Close combat, aren't they, archers? So
Yeah, a longbow's fantastic in a small space. I mean, if it was crossbowmen, I would it would make more sense, but never mind.
Actually, if I may interject on the subject of the archers, I think that's, if we think of it in terms of they are a ranged unit, which means that it's not that he's walking around indoors with 100 archers around him, it's that every time he appears anywhere that is an open space, he's got bodyguards that have a range of, I don't know how many meters, which means when he says, you know, we're safe within this arrow's length, he's basically talking about, you know, for 50 meters around me, nobody that I don't want getting close to me is able to approach. It's like he's got people with guns.
Yeah.
You know, it's that sort of thing.
They're securing the perimeter.
Yeah.
They're not around him. They're around, you know, you should arrange them around the theatre space. They should suddenly come out in the auditorium, shouldn't they? And
even if they were physically beside him, that still clears a circle of many meters around him. So it's clever in that sense, in that nobody that he doesn't want approaching could possibly get close enough to harm him.
Excellent. Okay, so Sascha, if I could ask you to read the cue points in for this time. So Richard, you're having fun, but the Queen is the one who's pulling you back, and you're going between a more public voice and a slightly more private voice, and that's sort of the game, that the sort of two analogues that we're dancing between. If that works for you.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so everybody's entering. Tresillian is whispering. Archers are arranged.
come, my Tresillian. Thus, like an emperor, shall King Richard reign, and you, so many kings attendant on him. Our guard of archers, keep the doors, I charge ye. Let no man enter to disturb our pleasures. Thou'st told me, kind Tresillian, thou'st devised blank charters to fill up our treasury, opening the chests of hoarding cormorants that laugh to see their kingly sovereign lack. Let's know the means we may applaud thy wit.
To the Queen.
Now, Anna Beam, how cheers my dearest queen? Is't holiday, my love? Believe me, lords, 'tis strange to take her from her sempstree. She and her maids are all for housewifery. Shalt work no more, sweet Nan, now Richard's king, and peer and people all shall stoop to him. We'll have no more protecting uncles, trust me. Prithee, look smooth, and bid these nobles welcome.
Me be welcome.
These are our counsellors, I tell ye, lady, and these shall better grace King Richard's court than all the doting heads that late controlled us. Thou seest already we begin to alter the vulgar fashions of our homespun kingdom. I tell thee, Nan, the states of Christendom shall wonder at our English royalty. We held a council to devise these suits. Sir Henry Green devised this fashion shoe, Bushy this pick, Bagot and Scroop set forth this kind coherence twixt the toe and knee, to have them chained together lovingly, and we, as sovereign, did confirm them all. Suit they not quaintly, Nan? Sweet Queen, resolve me.
The sentence were,
An act of folly, Nan. King's words are laws. If we infringe our word, we break our law. No more of them, sweet Queen.
understand his state.
They tell thee true, sweet love. Come ride with me, and see today my hall at Westminster, which we have builded now to feast our friends.
In the wearing?
We'll ride through London only to be gazed at. Fair Anne, babe, you shall along with us. At Westminster, you shall see my sumptuous hall, with my royal tables richly furnished, where every day I feast 10,000 men, to furnish out which feast I daily spend 30 fat oxen and 300 sheep, with fish and fowl in numbers numberless. Not all our chronicles shall point a king to match our bounty, state, and royalty, or let successors yet to come strive to exceed me. And if they forbid it, let record say only King Richard did it.
A year together.
As many days as I rid England's king, we will maintain that bounteous festival. Tressilian, look to your blank charters speedily, send them abroad with trusty officers. And Bagot, see a messenger be sent to call our Uncle Woodstock home to the court. Not that we love his meddling company, but that the raged commons loves his plainness and should grow mutinous about these blanks, will have him near us. Within this arrow's length we stand secure. We can restrain his strength. See it be done. Come, Anne, to our great hall, where Richard keeps his gorgeous festival.
And they go. It's interesting that desire to say within this arrow's length rather than his. And I did check the manuscript, or the edition based on the manuscript, that it is his rather than this. But this works better.
It makes more sense.
Unless you're actually literally going up to an archer and, making it a thing, rather, because it just seems to work better. And even if I don't know if I'm overstating that, but that's a thought, because the suggestion is at the beginning of the scene, actually, now that we've done it twice, is the moment you say keep the doors, I charge you, that's actually that's when they get deployed. They enter with you and you go, take your positions, and they all scatter and or for that matter just exit so they can play someone else in the next scene.
There's something in that last speech, almost as if somebody has tried to tell him it's not a good idea. We'll have him near us. No, it's okay. We'll be safe. Look, arrows. Yeah.
Arrows.
Yeah, you're right. It is a quick switcheroo, isn't it? But one thing that's interesting, again, if you look closer at that speech, he's, there's the one with the arrows as well. He's still, despite everything, he's also trying to keep everything moving very quickly. It's like he can't stand still. Especially on that last speech, as many days as I writ England's king. It feels, in terms of pace, it's quite quick. Whereas before, he's enjoying the pomp, he's enjoying lauding it. But on that last speech, it's almost as if it's like, right, let's do this quickly. Like send them abroad. Bagot, see a messenger be sent. And it's bang, quick, quick, quick. It's, you know, it's like, yeah, you're right. It's almost like somebody's told him it's a bad idea. Right, quickly, move on, move on. Dismiss, dismiss. Go, 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 go.
Which
That
is,
kind of, yeah.
Or maybe he just wants to get to his feasting at Westminster.
well, I'm not
Could
sure.
be as well.
It could be. I mean, the thing about that, what Richard does in that final speech is he's laying out the framework to make sure this all continues.
Yeah.
So he says, he makes a statement, I want this Bounteous Festival to continue forever. Then he says, Tresillian, go off and find me the money. Bagot, go and get Woodstock so we can blame him for anything that goes wrong. So actually, Richard is has got all his ducks in a row, even if other people are pushing their own agenda. At the end of, before Richard exits at this moment, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's bankrupting the kingdom for his own personal pleasure.
It is quick.
Then he goes to the festival with his wife.
I mean, there is a general mania in this scene that kind of grows towards the end.
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to get at. It's fast, isn't it?
Yeah.
You get what I mean, Tamara. It's quick, as opposed to that, oh yeah, here we are, I'm lording it. Right, bang, bang, bang. It builds, but it is quick in the end, isn't it?
Hmm.
Dang.
There's something psychologically written into the text that is really interesting and would need longer and more depth to explore, I think.
Oh, there's huge amounts in this scene. I mean, in a sense, this is a placeholder scene, actually, for what you're doing. All we're doing is sort of establishing that you are doing what you said you would be doing and setting a few minor hairs running elsewhere. A lot of the meat of what's going on in this scene is sort of happens after you go and around your entrances and exit, you know, because there's other people doing stuff around you. It's setting up lots of character things rather than necessarily too many explicit plot things that aren't mentioned already somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's still fab.
No, but it feels like there's a character turning point, not a plot turning point, but a character turning point for Richard in this. And I think if I look back through the other scenes, I've put them somewhere else so they're out of the way, but this is the scene where all the 11 start to turn up in the scansion. So suddenly you have all these feminine endings that I mentioned before we started recording.
Yeah. So the blank verse is going from 10-syllable line to 11-syllable line. So there's something different happening to the language that Richard is actually speaking. The moment he gets power, he gets an extra syllable.
Yeah.
You know, it seems reasonable. And it is a pivot scene in the sense that it's pretty much exactly the middle of Richard's, you know, text narrative. I mean, it's slightly destabilized by the fact there's probably some dialogue at the very end of the play we don't have for Richard, but only slightly. But it is pretty much bang in the middle. We do need to move forward, however. So, any additional thoughts about the scene? Hold on to. Maybe you can throw them in later. Next scene's relatively long, and there's quite a lot of Richard. Richard going in from verse into prose as well. It's mostly chatting to his mates. There's no queen in sight. There's a lot of dialogue with Green. And there's a relationship we perhaps should take some time to talk about. There's a lot of stuff going on in this scene, which the cue script process may have rendered a bit too Dadaistic, but let's see how it goes. Alexandra, if I could ask you to read the cue lines in. Richard enters into this scene, and there's quite a big gap between the last scene and this scene. There's quite a few bits of business about obtaining money and being generally oppressive that has occurred. Yes, Tamara.
Just quick note also, I just went through the rest of it because handily this one I've printed out. There is the Queen doesn't come back. This is the last time that they're on stage together. Yeah.
So that this from now on, Richard is only surrounded by his minions, and the Queen will eventually not only not reappear, but also will not reappear very dead. So there is that. Unfortunateness to Queen Anne, who is another character I'd quite like to actually workshop in isolation at some point. But then I'd like to do it with all the characters. There's very few characters in this play I don't want to workshop.
I was going to say,
Shows you something
Woodstock-
about the writing of it, right? Because it might, again, on first glance, it might feel as though, oh, okay, this play is about Thomas of Woodstock, and then you go, wait, but the king though, and then oh, it must be about Richard. Well, actually, no, because the queen though, and I think we can, yeah, as you say, we can actually find that about all the characters. So it's really nice that they've all got journeys and they've all got interesting facets. It's really well written.
Okay, let's continue journeying then. Okay, so Alexandra, you're everybody else, and say we enter mid-scene, enter the king with Green and others at the sound of trumpets.
Live by it.
Our uncle will not come then.
Flat and resolute.
Was ever subject so audacious?
Digest these wrongs?
Yes, as a mother that beholds her child dismembered by a bloody tyrant's sword. I tell thee, Bagot, in my heart remain such deep impressions of his churlish taunts, as nothing can remove the gall thereof, till with his blood mine eyes be satisfied.
Him thence perforce.
I dare not, Green, for while he keeps in the country, there is no meddling. He's so well beloved, as all the realm will rise in arms with him.
Become of him.
I like it well, sweet Green, and by my crown we'll be in the mask ourself, and so shall you. Get horses ready. This night we'll ride to Plashy. But see ye carry it close and secretly, for whilst this plot's a-working for the Duke, I'll set a trap for York and Lancaster. Go, Tressilian, let proclamation straight be sent, wherein thou shalt accuse the Dukes of treason, and then attach, condemn, and close imprison them. Lest the commons should rebel against us, we'll send unto the King of France for aid, and in requital we'll surrender up our forts at Guines and Calais to the French. Let crown and kingdom waste, yea, life and all, before King Richard see his true friends fall. Give order our disguises be made ready, and let Lepoole provide the ship and soldiers. We will not sleep, by heaven, till we have seized him.
Forget it else.
These traitors, once surprised, then all is sure. Our kingdom quiet and our state secure.
Land most lately.
So, sir, the love of thee and these, my dearest Green, hath won King Richard to consent to that, for which all foreign kings will point at us. And of the meanest subjects of our land we shall be censured strangely when they tell how our great father toiled his royal person, spending his blood to purchase towns in France, and we his son, to ease our wanton youth, become a landlord to this warlike realm. Rent out our kingdom like a pelting farm that erst was held as fair as Babylon, the maiden conqueress of all the world.
To assist you.
You four must be all then, for I think nobody else will follow you unless it be to hanging.
To a toadstool.
Very well, sir. They did well to choose you for their orator that has King Richard's love and heart in keeping. Your suit is granted, sir. Let's see the writing.
Here, my lord.
View them, Tressilian, then we'll sign and seal them. Look to your bargain, Green, and be no looser, for if you forfeit or run behind hand with me, I swear I'll both imprison and punish ye soundly.
I warrant ye.
If they be stubborn, do and spare not. Rack them soundly, and we'll maintain it. Remember ye, not the proviso enacted in our last parliament, that no statute, were it ne'er so profitable for the Commonwealth, should stand in any force against our proceedings.
Spirit to determine.
True, Green, and we will do it in spite of them. Is just, Tressilian?
Your Grace's pleasure.
How like you that, Green? Believe me, if you fail, I'll not favour ye a day.
Your worst, sir.
'Tis very good. Set your hands and seals. Tressilian, we make you our deputy to receive this money. Look strictly to them, I charge ye.
Rich a lordship.
Keep them, Tressilian. Now will we sign and seal to you. Never had English subjects such a landlord.
Him, Rentford.
Look that he do. We shall expect performance speedily. There's your indenture signed and sealed, which as our kingly deed we here deliver.
Money and tumbling.
We shall see your care, sir. Reach me the map, we may allot their portions and part the realm amongst them equally. You four shall hereby us divide yourselves into the 39 shires and counties of my kingdom, parted thus. Come stand by me and mark those shires assigned you. Bagot, thy lot betwixt the Thames and sea thus lies: Kent, Surrey, Sussex, Hampshire, Berkshire, Wiltshire, Dorsetshire, Somersetshire, Devonshire, Cornwall. Those parts are thine as ample, Bagot, as the crown is mine.
My princely sovereign.
Bushy, from thee shall stretch his government over these lands that lie in Wales, together with our counts of Gloucester, Worcester, Hereford, Shropshire, Staffordshire, and Cheshire. There's thy lot.
Hath honoured me.
Sir Thomas Scrope, from Trent to Tweed, thy lot is parted thus. All Yorkshire, Derbyshire, Lancashire, Cumberland, Westmoreland, and Northumberland. Receive thy lot, thy state and government.
Your Highness, throne.
Now, my green, what have I left for thee?
Nay, trust me.
I kept thee last to make thy part the greatest. See here, sweet green, these shires are thine. Even from the Thames to Trent thou here shalt lie in the middle of my land.
In my government?
Guess that by this. Thou hast London, Middlesex, Essex, Suffolk, Norfolk, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, Northamptonshire, Rutlandshire, Leicestershire, Warwickshire, Huntingdonshire, and Lincolnshire. There's your portion, sir.
Emperor over us.
Thus have I parted out my whole realm amongst ye. Be careful of your charge and government. And now to attach our stubborn uncles. Let warrants be sent down, Tressilian, Fulgaunton, York, Surrey, and Arundel, while we this night at Plashy suddenly surprise plain Woodstock. Being parted thus, we shall with greater ease arrest and take them. Your places are not sure while they have breath, therefore pursue them hard. Those traitors gone, the staves are broke, the people lean upon, and you may guide and rule them at your pleasures. Away to Plashy, let our mask be ready. Beware, plain Thomas, for King Richard comes, resolved with blood to wash all former wrongs.
And he exits. Okay. It's a really interesting scene because you've got two things going on. You've got Richard plotting against Thomas of Woodstock and, Green coming up with the plot of the mask and Richard, going absolutely great plan. And then in the middle, you've got everybody pushing for essentially the privatization of England. And Richard initially resists that, and he's resistant to the idea. He's not saying no, but he's resistant to it in verse. And then all the haggling is done in prose. And all the allotting of all the counties. Lucky us. I don't know if anyone's counted us to see if that actually is all the 39 shires and counties of my kingdom. I wouldn't bother doing it because it doesn't matter. But within all of that litany of places, it is that difference between Richard and what Richard gives to Green, and Green's slightly petulant thing of, what am I getting? You've given everything to everybody else, and then you give him all the really plum counties, all the really wealthy ones, Suffolk, Norfolk, Cambridgeshire. You're really going where all the wool production is. That's the wealthy place to go for. So it's the fact that the scene's doing two things: the sort of thing that Richard wants to do, and the stuff that the minions want to do, and they have to sort of. There is a certain talking him into it, and just other thoughts about what's going on with language as well, because Richard's quite violent in some of his. There's a lot of blood in the opening of this. So thoughts from the room about what's going on there. How was it for you, Richard?
It was mercurial, I want to say. No, it's, yes, there is all that violence, and then he's like, also green. Hi, green. Hello. And then no, I can't, do that. People are gonna be a bit weird about me turning myself into a landlord or that. And then he said, oh, fine. And yeah, I agree. I don't think you need to list all the parts, all the shires and all of that. You could just, I said that when we read the play as a whole, you feel like he's standing there with a map of England and just like, there you go. There you go.
But I think it's a wonderful effect, though, the just hearing the lists, because if nothing else, the number of things he gives differs between people. That it sounds like quite a lot. You sort of go, oh, he's getting, whoa, 8, 9, I've lost count now, and he's getting 5, 6, 7. Wait, is that fewer? And then even fewer still. And you get to the 4th one, and it doesn't end. The list just seems to go on and on. So I think in that sense, it's a really nice effect. And also, I found that section interesting, because it had to go into prose, because it would be difficult and a bit silly to try and rhyme the name of counties. It also makes a massive change. The fact that he goes from being, as Robert pointed out, he goes from being quite poetic about this actually horrific thing that he wants to do regarding his uncles, to being quite prosaic, but like literally prosaic, about this other thing, which is the division of the kingdom. It really, I think, it gives us a clue or a hint, as directorially speaking, as to how to play it, how to play the difference between the two. Not just in terms of Richard, but everybody else, because presumably the other people are also versing and prosing with him.
Yes, by and large, and it's also that it's quite a physical scene in that sense. That it's not like Richard is there doing a beautiful speech. He's dynamically giving portions to people. There's paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork going on in this, which Richard is having thrust at him as well. So to some degree, this scene is not perhaps as easy for us to do in this fashion, because it is a much more dynamic scene. Whereas the last scene is quite straightforward. It's much more Richard talking to some people, whereas this is very different. It's sort of the beginning and the end is slightly easier for us to look at, whereas all those lists are work, I think, in a staging capacity rather than as exciting text. The actual, you could rearrange the order of some of the places, and it wouldn't change the flow per se. Other thoughts? Aliki first.
I'm interested that he invokes his father's memory in his, when he's trying not to give the things away or thinking about not giving the land away, when just before he's cheerfully talked of giving away Calais and Guisnes, which his father's great battles held for the English crown. It's a weird kind of time to choose to remember his father.
That juxtaposition must be deliberate, mustn't it? I mean, it's clearly that it's that sort of, oh, if you must, but think of this is going to cost me so much. But he's already undermined his own text. Sascha.
And actually, that's following on very nicely to something I was thinking about as I was listening to it. It's more a character observation, following on from Tamara's wonderful interpretation of that, the mercurial aspect of it, to bring a modern slant into it. I don't know if any of you guys have been watching on E4 recently the new Harley Quinn series. Has anybody been watching that?
No.
Have a look, because the guy who's playing the Joker in this, it's a voiceover, it's an adult animated series. The guy who's playing the Joker actually takes, although he's manic, he takes almost exactly the same mercurial manicness to the whole character. And I kept thinking as I was listening to that, obviously with the Joker, if you've watched any of the Batman stuff, he's very loud and he's very physical, he's big and he's OTT, but the intentions are still the same in this speech, you know, especially as he's going on and on and on, you know, immediately switching from verse to prose. It automatically got me thinking, it's almost like a Joker mindset, because 1 minute the Joker could be absolutely sweet as anything, manipulative. The next, you imbeciles, you fools! And it's literally that instant switch. And I kept thinking, what if Richard is actually almost like what we know as the Joker, but a more controlled, internalized version of what's going on? And it especially comes across in this scene in a way. And I'm wondering what would happen if we went from one extreme to Joker to a toned down version, using the text as a guide.
Yes. I'm interested in, if we're talking mercurial, is also just simply the extremity of enemies as well, or favorites, because he says green so many times, and I think it's almost like it needs to be every time you say his name, it's like you just get a little hit of love, or something needs to happen. But when he's talking about York and Lancaster, you know, it's all deadly hate, and in that sense of switching, as well. Other thoughts? I'm kind of tempted to actually move forward rather than go over too much of this again. I don't know how people are feeling, because I don't know if this scene is quite as good an exercise for this particular thing. I think I'd just like to do the first sort of third of this scene before it goes into prose. Just do that in isolation, if that seems reasonable, and just play around with the way you talk about different people, Tamara.
Okay.
So, you know, when you're talking about Bagot, when you're talking about Green, you know, really go for how much, you know, they're your mates or you love them. And, you know, I don't think you love Tresillian, but he's very useful to you. Whereas when you're talking about York and Lancaster and the other people, your uncle, our uncle will not come then, you know. It's like they've delivered the worst possible news, and use the Joker as a template and see if that gives you something.
I'm afraid the last Joker I've seen is the Dark Knight Joker.
Go for it. Go for it.
Right.
And I don't remember it all that well.
Okay. Try, in that case, if we're talking Heath Ledger, little hint, then if you don't mind, Robert.
Yeah, go for it.
Think with this current Joker with Harley Quinn, he's very mercurial and he literally goes from one extremity to the other. So think Ledger's interpretation, only on a more humanized scale.
Right.
So when you're talking to your friends or about your friends, everything's lovely and happy, and when you're talking about your uncles, everything is death.
Much easier.
Yeah. Okay,
which is basically how the Harley Quinn Joker is.
Yeah.
So Perfect.
I'm much better at doing Harley Quinn than I am at doing the Joker. That's why it's a bit terrifying.
Okay, go for Harley Quinn then. Yeah.
Up until when
Similar approach anyway, so it makes perfect sense.
Okay, we might be getting bogged down on that. Yeah,
Anyway,
go for happiness and death. That's your general notes.
Up until what line do you want to go?
We'll go from the top of the scene, from "Live by Our Uncle Will Not Come" then. But I think we won't go too much into the. We might then skip to the end. I'm not feeling that we can do the middle of that scene very effectively in this forum.
Cool.
So, Aliki, if you could do the other lines, please, in whichever fashion you feel.
Live by it.
Uncle will not come then.
Flat and resolute.
Was ever subject so audacious?
Digest these wrongs?
Yes, as a mother that beholds her child dismembered by a bloody tyrant's sword, I tell thee, Bagot, in my heart remain such deep impressions of this churlish taunts as nothing can remove the gall thereof till his blood mine eyes be satisfied.
Him thence perforce.
I dare not green. For while he keeps in the country, there is no meddling. He so well beloved, as all the realm will rise in arms with him.
Become of him.
I like it well, sweet green, and by my crown, well, I'll be in the mask ourselves. We'll be in the mask ourselves, and so shall you. Get horses ready. This night we'll ride to Plashy. But see ye carry it close and secretly. For whilst this plot are working for the Duke, I'll set a trap for York and Lancaster. Go, Tressilian, let proclamation straight be sent, wherein thou shalt accuse the Dukes of treason, and then attach, condemn, and close imprison them. Lest the commons should rebel against us, we'll send unto the King of France for aid, and in requital we'll surrender up our forts of Guines and Calais to the French. Let crown and kingdom waste, yea, life and all, before King Richard see his true friends fall. Give order our disguises be made ready, and let Lepool provide the ship and soldiers. We will not sleep, by heaven, till we have seized him.
Forget it else.
These traitors once surprised, then all is sure, our kingdom quiet, and our state secure.
Land most rarely.
So, sir, the love of thee and these, my dearest Green, hath won King Richard to consent to that for which all foreign kings will point at us, and of the meanest subjects of our land we shall be censured strangely when they tell how our great father toiled his royal person, spending his blood to purchase towns in France, and we his son, to ease our wanton youth, become a landlord to this warlike realm. Rent out our kingdom like a Pelton farm, that as was held as fair as Babylon, the maiden conqueress of all the world.
To assist you.
And there we'll pause. Let's just skip to the end and just do that very final speech. And again, you've got lots of names mentioned throughout that. So play on the hatred and occasional love and see what comes out of that final. Thus I've parted out my whole realm amongst you.
Thus I have parted out my whole realm amongst ye. Be careful of your charge and government, and now to attach our stubborn uncles. Let warrants be sent down, Tressilian, for Gaunt and York, Surrey and Arundel, while we this night at Plashy suddenly surprise plain Woodstock. Being parted thus, we shall with greater ease arrest and take them. Your places are not sure while they have breath, therefore pursue them hard. Those traitors gone, the staves are broke the people lean upon, and you may guide and rule them at your pleasures. Away to Plashy, let our mask be ready. Beware, plain Thomas, for King Richard comes, resolved with blood to wash all former wrongs.
Yes, he's enjoying himself, isn't he? He's getting his revenge. Any final thoughts on that particular scene? That's one where the dynamics of the scene is actually slightly more important than the individual speeches that some of what Richard is saying. So that's a really interesting one to look at in the future.
Regarding actually, yes, scene dynamic, there's a really interesting thing that happens in the bit that we didn't go back to read, the prose thing, whereby Green and Richard seem to be in assent, but also almost threatening each other. And that only works when we also see what Green is saying. But yes, there's a restructuring of the dynamic between Richard and his followers within these three different sections, the verse, prose, verse bits. His relationship, their relationships, I think, change in potentially a massive way. Through not just because he's granting them a lot more power, but just through their interactions in the dialogue.
Yeah, I mean it's not just Richard and Green. It's all of the hangers-on, Bagot and Bushy, and Tresillian, and their interrelationships, which we noted when we did the read-through, is that they are all playing power games to different degrees.
And whereas this scene as a complete scene might not be a huge change in Richard, it's him inflicting, I think it might not be the best word, change on everybody else.
But also the attempt of everybody else to inflict change on him. He's being manipulated in a slightly different way than to his uncles before him. I mean, that's I think the interesting thing that we'll be able to find looking at Richard in a different way further down the line. Other thoughts about this before we move on? We've only got a few short scenes to do. No, excellent. So the next scene is the mask itself. Richard doesn't say an awful lot during it. He's on stage for a fair amount of time. Everyone's wearing masks. They're about to capture poor Thomas. You've even brought your own mask. Oh, I don't know who that could be. It must be some random mummer has entered the building.
Goddamn hood. There we go.
There we are. So Woodstock is saying various things throughout this. I'll ask Sascha if you could read the other dialogue here. It's almost all Woodstock is the cues.
That's a really cool theme.
So the first cue that is useful to Woodstock says "Bid you welcome," which is a cue for them to dance. So that's your dancing cue. There we are. Very nice. We'll then do the dialogue that follows on. So this is pretty much the maskers have all sort of come in and they've heard noises off and they know something bad's happening. So Sascha, if you could read Woodstock.
Bid you welcome.
They dance.
Show your faces.
Guard fast the doors and seize him presently. This is the cave that keeps the tusked boar that roots up England's vineyards uncontrolled. Bagot, arrest him. If for help he cry, drown all his words with drums confusedly.
Led like slaves.
Put on a visor, stop his cries.
Your unjust proceedings.
Stops his mouth, I say, we'll hear no more.
Must Woodstock bleed?
Deliver him to Liverpool, the ship lies ready. Convey him to Calais speedily. There use him as we gave directions. Sound up your drums, our hunting sports are done. And when you're past the house, cast by your habits and mount your horses with all swiftest haste. The boar is taken, and our fears are past.
Lovely, and the scene ends and they exit. It's a big, confusing scene that, they indicate that, if he makes a noise, start playing drums. So there's an awful lot of noise and stuff going on here. Anything to note, do we think, about the dialogue here Our fears are past. That's an interesting one. It's is he still afraid of his uncle, Tamara?
Well, I was also wondering in the language of the time, in the pronunciation of the time, would haste have rhymed with past?
Probably not. Or it might have done. Who knows?
Because this is the last
Hast.
line of
It could have been hast, I suppose. Yeah, that might have been possible. Seems a bit forced. I think it's lost to us, even if it did.
Yeah. Just because he, I think, ends the scene with that, and it's not a rhyming couplet, it doesn't sound like you say. It sounds like there's still some fear there. It's not very in control.
Because of course, it could have been hast and past, couldn't it? More past rather than past. Swiftest hast, fears are past. The past, hast, swiftest hast. That's one for the original pronunciation squad. But yeah, we can't really do that. It won't work. It's mostly plot and triumphalism, really, isn't it? I'm not that fussed about going over this one again because it's very short, and we've got another scene which is a bit more meaty coming up. Any additional thoughts about that particular little bit of dialogue about Richard?
Could I point out a couple of things?
Yes, please.
One is, so Richard seems to use a lot of imperatives. He speaks little, but what he speaks is commands. Guard the door, bag it, arrest him, stop his mouth, deliver him. It's all in imperatives. And the other interesting thing is he doesn't address Woodstock at all. He doesn't speak to, he speaks of Woodstock. So, relating that to our fears of past, I think there is definitely a reason for that choice. It's a directorial choice, but as to what exactly the reason is. But yes, in terms of what happens in the dialogue, Richard is not engaging Woodstock directly. He's making other people do physical things to him.
And that's also more apparent in the scene itself, because Woodstock is talking deliberately. He's explicitly saying, "It's Richard over there in the mask, isn't it? You're Richard." Big speech about how bad Richard's been. And so Richard deliberately going, "No, not here, not here. I'm just somebody else giving orders wearing a mask." That says quite a lot. Put a towel over his head and pretending he's not there.
But also, he's in command now. He's finally in command.
Yeah.
Richard is. What with those imperatives. He's not even justifying or requiring approval or anything. He's just, you do that thing. And mostly they do.
Yeah. Richard as man of action. Who knew that this was the kind of thing that would, finally make him feel secure in power? A little bit of home invasion and kidnap. That's his level.
It's the apogee of his authority.
Yeah. Because we're about to go in a very different direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me that he has to go that far. He keeps saying, "Oh, the Commons love Woodstock," etc., etc. But supposedly, if you think about the fact that apparently these guys lied to him all this time, surely he could have just got them executed or something. Considering his uncles are only dukes, and they clearly committed some sort of treason by keeping his birthday from him. I don't know. I feel like you could have spun that if you'd been a more confident king.
I think that there is a logical progression to what he's doing. He's stripping them of their power first, then he strips them of their lands, which is another form of power because it's money, and then he goes into arresting them. And I think he would have been a bit screwed if he tried to just arrest them straight off the bat.
Right.
I don't think it's a difference between having power and actually having power, or wielding resources. If you don't have the money, you don't have the lands, you don't have the money, you don't have the the ability.
Right.
And there's a difference between betrayal and treason, in the sense that he might feel, and indeed be, horrendously betrayed by them, but the legality of, can we call it treason? Can we try them for treason? Can we get rid of them that way? Is, I think, part of what he discusses with his friends earlier, when he's going, Tresillian, you're a lawyer, find me a reason.
Right, yeah.
Mm. You know, I mean, Richard is not an idiot. I think there's an important point there, is, you know, he is thinking. I mean, he's not very well counseled and he's impetuous and all the rest of it. But he's not stupid. You know, there is a clear logic to his path to actual power here, even if he wields it really badly. I mean, the thing is, if he got rid of his uncle's power base and then spent the money wisely, we wouldn't have a play.
I guess that's where the thought came from, because I feel like this whole plot of going into create a mask and then kidnap his uncle, essentially, it just feels quite weak. It seems sometimes to me that I'm trying not to judge him. I'm really trying not to judge him, but it feels, and we've said that before, it feels like a very young king, like a teenager who's, oh, this is a good plan, we'll do that. In terms of decision making.
Well, again, it's Green's plot. It's Green's idea, and, you know, he's sort of following the advice of Green a lot. And, you know, none of those decisions are great.
The very modern interpretation that occurs to me is of ADHD. He has attention deficit disorder. He's always going like that. And the last, yeah.
Yes, and that he needs his uncles to be his walking Ritalin, doesn't he?
Yeah, there is definitely something like that in the text.
Yeah. Okay, well, Richard's going to do something very different next time in the next scene, and this short scene is very much, I mean, yes, we haven't got the dialogue that goes in between, but you kind of don't need it at all, actually. We will do it regardless. So, Alexandra, if you can read the interlines, but let's just say King Richard is not very happy. So, enter King Richard Greenan's group.
Make her live.
Then let sad sorrow kill King Richard too, for all earthly joys with her must die. And I am killed with cares eternally, for Anne of Beam is dead, forever gone. She was too virtuous to remain with me, and heaven hath given her higher dignity. Oh, God, I fear even here begins our woe. Her death's but chorus to some tragic scene that shortly will confound our state and realm. Such sad events black mischief will attend, and bloody acts, I fear, must crown the end.
Many comforts drown.
Despair and madness seize me, oh my dear friends, what loss can be compared to such a queen? Down with this house of sheen, go, ruin all, pull down her buildings, let her turrets fall, forever lay it waste and desolate, that English king may never here keep court, but to all ages leave a sad report. When men shall see these ruined walls of sheen, and sighing say, here died King Richard's queen, for which we'll have it wasted, lime and stone, to keep a monument of Richard's moan of torturing grief.
Your sorrows cease.
Send post to Calais and bid Liverpool forbear, on pain of life to act our sad decree. For heaven's love go prevent the tragedy. We have too much provoked the powers divine. And here repent thy wrongs, good Uncle Woodstock, the thought whereof confounds my memory. If men might die when they would point the time is now, King Richard would be gone, for as a fearful thunderclap doth strike the soundest body of the tallest oak, yet harmless leaves the outward bark untouched, so is King Richard struck. Come, come, let's go. My wounds are inward burn my woe.
And exit Richard and everybody else. And so within the context of the scene, basically people come on stage and go, Queen's dead. King's quite sad. King comes on, says, Queen is dead. I'm quite sad. Let's destroy this house that she died in. I'm feeling a bit guilty. Maybe I shouldn't kill my uncle.
Also, my wounds are inward burn my woe, but I just had a massive tantrum of grief.
Yeah, and we're going sort of from inward loss, outward destruction, and then guilt, and also perhaps fear going on there, because it's a case of, are you suddenly going, oh, bugger, I'm about to kill somebody. This could go horribly, horribly wrong. Everything's going horribly, horribly wrong. Maybe just pull back on all the bad things that I've been doing. And I genuinely, I think next time we'll do it, we won't even do it with the interjections. We'll just run that as a speech with just moments in between. But I think we need to talk about where we can go with this, because the question is, how big and over the top do we want it to be? Or do we want moments of over the top? No, is it demonstrably hair-wringing grief up there, or is it something that actually is much more internalized, perhaps? Just thoughts from the room about what do you do with a lamenty grief scene? Sascha's got some form on this. You were doing lamenty grief the other day.
I think yes, there is. I was just thinking this, strangely enough, Robert. There is a crossover with the dinner that I did last week. In the sense, you need to create the journey. I think if you went too much on one level, it would lose the impetus and the ethos behind it. Especially as I think it's a good point to show that Richard, despite his pomposity earlier on, he actually cares for Anne and loves Anne that much. I mean, you can tell as much from some of the things that he uses. For instance, for all earthly joys with her must die, and I am killed with cares eternally. Somebody who's genuinely grieving in this way would use this type of language in these types of plays. And as it goes on, it's almost like there's 1 minute he's trying to take it all on board, he's internalizing, and then the next, it's almost as if, especially towards the end, that's when he gets, I think, a bit more demonstrative OTT, especially on the ruined walls of Sheen. Here died King Richard's queen. He's immortalizing her at that point. In the final speech, it's almost as if that grief then turns to anger again, especially as it's then turned at one point towards Uncle Woodstock, as he mentions it. That, in a way, is a shift, I think, into then what is to come. It's like the genuine grief that he has is then used as ammunition for later on in the speech, on that final section. He's like, I may be feeling this now, I am feeling this now, and I am grieving, I'm hurting, I don't care who knows it, but I'm going to use it. It feels like that last speech is like he's going to use that grief as ammunition for what's going to come next.
See, I wonder if it's and again I'm back to feeling like Richard is very young, because I'm completely agreeing with Sascha. I think he's genuinely grieving, but he doesn't know what to do with it, and because of that it turns to anger. I wonder if the Uncle Woodstock thing comes in because as much as he resented being controlled by his uncles, that was it's sort of like I hate my parents, but I want them now because I'm feeling all this stuff and I don't know what to do with it. Is it a sense of the little boy that's coming out?
It's funny you say that. There are times at certain points where it feels. I agree with you, Tamara. It's like he's throwing his toys out the pram, in a way, isn't it? Especially with that sheen line. Um, it's like, yeah, I do agree with you there. I mean, you could again, this could be a complete directorial choice as to where you go with it, but one way could be that he deliberately uses that grief for what's to come next, or, as you say, doesn't know what to do with that grief, hence the rawness behind it. And so it would be, I think, in this instance, down to directorial interpretation as well as actor, I think.
Because as long as the psychology of that journey is sound, whichever one you choose, you can go OTT with it, but it will, it will be less external. It will be a genuine.
If I may contribute,
Mm.
I don't know. Sorry, let me put this into better words. I agree with both of you that it is genuine. I don't know where the line that defines what is and isn't over the top might be, but it certainly is out of character in the sense of it is something uncharacteristic of the Richard that we have encountered. And I think that's done on purpose. And I believe it's done in a very beautiful, again, narratively, constructively way, because this is something he's never experienced.
Yeah.
That he's been king for the better half of his life. He's 22 and he's been king since 9. But in order for that to happen, his father had to die. So he was really little when he lost that. He's had these other people as not exactly father figures, but as you say, Tamara, you sort of revert when feeling terrible hurt. You revert to I want my mummy, which in this case is potentially Woodstock. But also he hasn't had those losses. We look at other stories that are to do with first love, and however much romantically infatuated he may or may not be with Anne, this is the first experience he's had of that side of life, and he's become very affectionate. He's been very affectionate to her, as we've noticed. And she's been nice to him. She's the only person who's been nice to him without wanting things, which I think somewhere within he kind of recognizes or understands. This is a person who is treating me well just to treat me well, not because they want things. So to lose that, I feel like is, from his perspective, is enormously destabilizing, and it's a feeling that he's never had before. So of course it hurts the worst because it hurts for the first time.
I just want to just pick you up, because you were saying that the Woodstock becomes a sort of like his lost mummy. I'm sort of thinking with Anne that that there's almost a mother figure in that she is the only one who's been a conscience figure for him, and that he now has to somehow step in and suddenly feel guilt and fear and remorse for the things that he's been doing. So his love for Anna Beam is he's taken her for granted. He's largely ignored her, but she's always been there to be the. I mean, she's sort of the beard for his respectability, in that sense of being there, the one person in government of this regime who's always been steadfast and true and honest, and she is dead, and now he's exposed. And that's how I'm feeling about a lot of this. Is that there's so much of this is about fear. And a fear about him for himself as well, especially as we go further into it. Because his relationship with Anne, it doesn't feel reflected otherwise with this speech.
I'm not going to disagree with any of the things that have come before about how genuine it is, but I'm going to come down really hard in agreement with you on it is really about him. He says queen, 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 queen. He says Anna Beam. It's never love, it's never Nan, both things we've heard him call her. And it's not a monument to her, it's a monument to his grief. I mean, I'm being unsympathetic here, but Sheen is going to be, this is how sad I was, not this is how great she was.
I somewhat agree with you there, Aliki, because I wanted to mention my visual perception of his behavior in this scene is that if we see him crumble in terms of the physicality, if we see that that's what's happening to him, it will make so much more sense of his request or his demand that the house be torn down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. What I keep thinking of, and it comes back to the point of how young he is when I was in high school, one of the girls in the year above me was killed in a car accident. And all of a sudden, the entire school, it was a girls' school, went into absolute hysterias of grief. Now, some of us had known her to smile at in the hallway, but we were all so into the terrible grief of it.
I had exactly the same experience. It was a small independent school, and I think she was even a teacher's daughter, and she died in a car crash. She was a year younger than me, and it paralyzed the entire school.
Yeah.
The teachers left us alone. Us prefects had to take care of everything because it just paralyzed everybody. Yeah. And they weren't taking care of the kids. It was a boarding school too, so you had kids there who didn't know what was going on, and it was like this massive calamity. But yeah, it is, and I think one thing that we can probably really establish from Richard's journey in general is that it's always about him.
Yeah.
Very true. Just to be clear here, that's yeah.
I was going to say, to be honest, that's probably true of most characters, because that's what makes them interesting. And let's be fair, most people, because as you're talking about girls' schools, it's for many people, it's the first time that they reflect on mortality, and therefore, and immediately after that, their own mortality. And that's probably what Richard's doing as well here. He's going, oh my goodness, what happened? She's gone. I could go at any time. What are the things in my life that I need to redress? Oh God, I was going to kill my uncle. Mortality again. Yes, let's not do. It becomes this enormous panic. But yes, of course, it's all self-oriented.
I don't want to I want to move ahead and just finish the general text for the play. And in fact, I'll lied what are effectively two separate scenes, because there isn't much text left to do, and there's a bit more text to do with grief that I think would be helpful in discussing this bit of text. So the situation of the country has gone from bad to worse. There is the uncles are on the march, the surviving uncles, one of them's dead, and Richard is having a bit of a parley / chat with his mates in what's a much longer scene in many ways, but there's very little dialogue from Richard in it. So who hasn't done Sascha, I think next, isn't it? Sascha, if you can read were you last time? I can't remember.
I was last time, yeah.
Aliki then. Aliki, if you'll read the interjecting dialogue, we will go from marching about, king, etc., soldiers, everyone's marching about. And Richard, although we could have easily surprised.
Mm-hmm. Although we could have easily surprised, dispersed, and overthrown your rebel troops that draw your swords against our sacred person, the highest God's anointed deputy, breaking your holy oaths to heaven and us, yet of our mild and princely clemency we have forborne, that by this parliament we might be made partaker of the cause that moved ye rise in this rebellious sort.
You're muted, Aliki.
At his feet.
You have forgotten, Uncle Lancaster, how you in prison murdered cruelly a friar Caramelite, because he was to bring in evidence against your grace of most ungracious deeds and practices.
His state secure.
And by my crown, if still you thus persist, your heads and hearts ere long shall answer it.
That terrored Christendom.
I cannot brook these braves. Let drums sound death and strike at once to stop this traitor's breath.
Traitors, traitors, traitors.
Again we double it. Rebellious traitors, traitors to heaven and to us. Draw all your swords and fling defiance to these traitorous lords.
Defend the right.
And they exit in the ensuing melee. Green is killed and Richard is left with Green's body.
O princely youth, King Richard's dearest friend, what heavy star this day had dominance to cut off all thy flowering youthful hopes? Prosper, proud rebels, as you dealt by him hard-hearted uncles, unrelenting Charles, that here have murdered all my earthly joys. Oh, my dear Green, wert thou alive to see how I'll revenge thy timeless tragedy on all their heads that did but lift a hand to hurt this body that I held so dear. Even by this kiss and by my crown, I swear.
Be all betrayed.
Oh, my dear friends, the fearful wrath of heaven sits heavy on our heads for Woodstock's death. Blood cries for blood, and that almighty hand permits not murder unrevenged stand. Come, come! We yet may hide ourselves from worldly strength, but heaven will find us out and strike at length.
And tendered so.
They exit. And that is it for Richard, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, there might be some additional dialogue at the very end of the play, but sadly the last page or so is lost. So I kind of expect Richard will come back on again and sort of go, well, I'll be king again if you insist, kind of thing. Let's compare Richard's last speech there, O princely youth, with over the body of Green with what has just happened of the reported death of Anne. I think when we were talking about the last speech, it's all about him. Do we feel that about this speech about Green?
Well, this language does switch very strongly in the sense that especially at the end, it seems more personal than the last one, although I think the emotion is still very genuine either way in both these sections. But here, especially when he's talking about, even by this kiss and by my crown, I swear, it's very intimate. It's more intimate compared to the last one, although the grief is still exactly the same, and he still refers to earthly joys again. But whether the earthly joys he's now talking about, I mean, this is just a clarification question, whether he's talking about the earthly joys as a whole, or whether he's slanting it, and again, depending on directorial interpretation, whether you view the earthly joys in general for, at this point, talking about both his friend and Anne, or whether it's just earthly joys in relation to his best friend.
It is interesting, isn't it, that he says, all earthly joys with her must die, and then Green dies.
I know. It's weird, isn't it?
And then he says, that he have murdered all my earthly joys.
It's
Uh,
bizarre.
For me, this grief feels, much more intimate and much realer. That repeated word, dear, dearest friend, that middle one that really gets me. Oh, my dear Green, those long syllables. And again, this body that I held so dear, and that's so specific and so tactile. He must be holding the body as he says he held the body dear in order to kiss it.
Yes. The body is literally there on stage. He's got it in his arms.
Yeah.
He goes to kiss it, is either interrupted by the immediate arrival of somebody else or mid kiss. And yes, all my earthly joys in this context, is it that general sense of things, or is it earthly joys in a much more
Earthly way.
earthly way? I mean, it really is very explicit about this relationship in that sense, and the contrast, the deliberate contrast of these two moments, the demonstrative nature of Richard when talking about his wife, and this private moment, because nobody else is on stage for this. There's nothing demonstrative about this because there is no one to demonstrate it to. He's talking to someone, and I don't know when he's talking about Anne who he's talking to, apart from generally. And you know, you could really push it all the way and say that the thing about Anne is actually a bit cynical. I don't think it is, but I think you could push it in that direction.
I think it's self-indulgent, that not cynical, whereas this one feels more.
Yeah, Alexandra.
It's just that they lead him in different directions. If we look back at the grief for Anne, we've got 4 lines that are about her, less than 4.
Yeah.
And everything else is either about him or in a different direction. So it leads him from his grief into fear, into despair and madness, seize me, and into this destructive thing about the house, which he talks about way more than he talks about Anne. Right. It is his grief for her, like that can't be, you know, we shouldn't disassociate that, but it leads him, you know, on an active path. Whereas with Green, it also leads him to do something, but it's a completely different thing. It's right, let's kill everybody who did this to you, you know. So with Anne, it's destructive in the sense of against property, because nothing, you know, what killed her was disease, so he can't fight back against the thing that killed her.
I was going to say that because it's much more focused. Even though it's a contrast is that it's so private, it's much more focused because it's like, he got killed, I can revenge him. With Anne, it's kind of,
she just died, so I must destroy a house.
I do, yeah.
What's interesting is there are similarities. There becomes a pattern to how he responds to grief. Now that we've seen him have to live through it more than once, you know, it seems to be this pattern of going, I have lost this, I want to break something.
Go back to Kylo Ren.
And fight back against the feeling. And in one case, it's breaking down the house because he has nothing else to take revenge on, as you say, Tamara. And in this case, it's okay, who did this to you? I'm going to do the same to them back. But also his grief here, the lead up to I'm going to do something about it is equally short.
Yeah.
You know, except with Anne, it was, you know, 3-4 lines about her, and then fear and worry and concern. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I know what to do. Now it hurts me, and I know what to do.
There's
you know,
also.
go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt you.
The only other thing I wanted to point out is not only is I think the reason why we are feeling as though one is more intimate than the other is because one is he gets the news and he has to deal with the information, and 2 is he sees it happen, so he has to deal with the reality. you know, there's a body right there. With Anne, it was just someone told him that somewhere else his queen died.
I was going to say that because he gets a goodbye with Green, and assuming that the queen died of sickness, there's a good chance that he didn't get to see the body either. So it's kind of, she was there, he knew she was ill, and then she's just never going to come back.
And of course, one of the elements of this, you know, I'm going to, you know, that swearing on revenge is, you know, in that missing final element of the play, is if there is a reconciliation between, or, you know, a slightly forced reconciliation between Richard and his uncles, that force follows directly on, but, you know, but a few pages, since he said he's going to revenge on them. And that sort of ends the play on potentially quite a nicely ambiguous note of where is the kingdom going from here. Because any resolution the play presents us of everything returning to normal is balanced by our knowledge that it's so not, that this is just act one of a pretty disastrous narrative for Richard.
And potentially a sequel hook.
Yeah, indeed. I'm sure someone might get around to writing a sequel to this. I'm sure someone will do that. Other thoughts about Richard generally, I think, as we're now into extra time, want to wrap the session up, as it were. I think we've in 4 hours plus the 8+ hours that we looked at the play overall, we still have only barely scratched the surface of this character.
I've actually made a note about the scene where he grieves for Anne, because I want to look at it as a speech, just because there is something there that's going to keep bugging me until I take a look at that speech and see what I can do with it. I want to play him, like, for realsies. Because he is so complex. I love the psychology that I think you can discover in that character.
I mean, definitely the plan at the moment is to work towards doing an audio version, and then use that as a springboard to do a stage version. So that's sort of currently the thinking.
And it should be on stage. It should be done again.
It should be. It should be done repeatedly. I mean, this is just such a good play, and you know there are so many good programming opportunities to put this with other plays, and so the fact that it is not done is just actually it's not just silly. It's actually, I think it's just criminal. Frankly, I just think it really is. It's just it's an explicit snub as far as I can tell for this play, and I'm not bitter.
We must rectify this at once.
Yes,
we must.
Yes. So in that sense, this is a process whereby we are working towards, once I'm in a better position to be producing more full cast audio stuff, that we're producing this as a full cast audio probably sometime next year, or to the end of this year, perhaps. And these workshops are moving in that general direction. So that's the plan.
Nice. Awesome.
I don't know at what point we're going to be coming back to Woodstock with probably another character, and probably working in a slightly different way. We might do scenes rather than individual characters. Probably not next week, but maybe the week after. But I definitely want to be coming back to it relatively soon. Any final thoughts before I close the session?
One thing that we haven't looked at a great deal, but which might be either revelatory or completely irrelevant, is there seems to be a lot of constant change in Richard's dialogue and monologues, speech, between how he refers to himself. He doesn't change so much how he speaks of or to other people, as much as he changes how he refers to himself. So there's a lot of I, we, King Richard in the same sentence, or, in juxtaposition and up and down. It might be that that's not actually a consideration that the writer had, and we might be reading too much into it, or it might be a really precise clue as to where he is, as to how far and how much he pivots.
Mm-hmm. I make a note. Other thoughts? Closing. I think we've done a good first draft, shall we say, of the idea of Richard II in the play Thomas of Woodstock. There will be future videos and more on this as we go anon. If you'd like to help support the creation of a future production of Thomas of Woodstock, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page at patreon.com/Beyond Shakespeare. That's the general fund for the ongoing production of audio, drama, and live productions, which at this time of plague is all the more important to keeping these things going. So if you'd like to see some Woodstock, then get in touch and lobby for it and help support it. Otherwise, thanks to all the readers here today, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.